everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I wanted to make a video with a variety of recipes and ideas for dinner that could be used as one pot or one pan dinners. For those of you who are very busy and find it difficult to get dinner on the table in a timely manner, which often results in getting takeout or having food delivered, which can be expensive. So in this video, I am going to show you a hamburger noodle casserole, a beef lo mein casserole, a Big Mac casserole, a tater tot casserole, and a one-pot beef mixture for burrito bowls. To start off, we're making hamburger noodle casserole in the Dutch oven. I made a video of just this recipe not too long ago, and I'll leave that link in the description box. This dish can be made in the Dutch oven or a frying pan. After it's cooked, you could put it in a baking dish and bake it in the oven, but I didn't do that. I start off by browning a pound of ground beef in the Dutch oven. While the ground beef is browning, I'm prepping everything else. I opened a 4-ounce can of tomato sauce and a can of tomatoes. I made 2 cups of beef broth with 2 cups of water and 2 teaspoons of a beef soup base. But if you have beef broth in a can or a box, go ahead and use that. I also added 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce to the beef broth mix. I measured out 2 cups of penne pasta. I had some chopped onion already in the refrigerator, so I put that in with the beef to cook. And I used paper towels to mop up the grease that was rendered out of the beef until I got that dry. And then I added my seasonings. I had measured those out earlier in the day when I had some time, and so getting everything prepped really just made this come together really fast. You could do part of the prep work the night before, or if you have a few minutes in the afternoon. The spices and seasonings that I added were 1 teaspoon of salt, a half a teaspoon of pepper. I added 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of Italian seasoning, a half a teaspoon of chili powder. And there you just saw that the tomato sauce, the tomatoes, the beef broth, and the pasta just went into the pot. And so I am going to bring that to a boil now and then turn it down and let it simmer until the pasta is done, which took about probably 7 to 10 minutes. After the pasta was done, I added some sour cream. The recipe calls for 1 cup, and I used less than that. I just eyeballed it, and a 1/4 cup of milk. And then I added, after I mixed that all up really well, then I added some cheese on top and then put the lid back on the Dutch oven. I had turned the heat off, and so just the residual heat from the Dutch oven melted the cheese. On this night, I made a side salad to go with the pasta dish. And there you have a complete meal. If you want, add a loaf of crusty bread a nice slice of crusty bread, and there you've got dinner. This dish may not get an A+ in visuals, but it gets an A+ in flavor and in ease of preparation. And it's become a new family favorite and something that I turn to when I don't know what I'm going to make for dinner. Now, on to one pot beef lo mein. The week that I'm filming this, there had been sales on steaks at the grocery stores, and so at a good price, I stocked up on steak, and this is 2 pounds of steak that I thinly sliced to get ready to stir fry. And I also didn't have a whole carrot, so I grated up about 3 or 4 of the larger baby carrots and had that ready to go. I'm making one pot beef lo mein, and I also have a video of the beef lo mein, and I will put the link to that in the description box. But what makes this different is that I adapted it to just use one pot or one skillet. So I quick fried up all of that beef really fast on a high heat. And because the pan was kind of yucky and I didn't want to impart that burned flavor into the rest of the dish, I did do a quick wash on the pan. But if yours doesn't stick like mine did, you wouldn't need to do that. The recipe calls for spaghetti noodles, but I could not find what I needed in my pantry. I don't think I've ever run out of spaghetti noodles, but I have now. And so I had 3 packages of ramen noodles that I used, and I really like this brand. It's a vegetarian brand, and this is the chicken flavor. And even though I'm doing a beef dish, I decided to just go for it and use the chicken flavor packet with that. So I am breaking up 3 packages of the ramen noodles into my skillet, and I eventually ended up using 2 cups of water for that. I had 3 packages, but only used 2 packages of the flavor packets, and I felt like that was enough. But you use all 3 if you want to. And if you're using the spaghetti noodles, you probably don't need to put a soup base or a bouillon or a flavor packet onto that. But since I had it, I went ahead and used it. If I had used the spaghetti noodles, I would have broken them up before I put them into the pan to cook, and I would have used the same amount of water, 2 cups of water. And that would have been probably, the recipe said 3/4 to 1 pound of spaghetti noodles. So as you can see, I'm smushing these around to get them to go down into the water, and they cook up really quickly. And so as they're almost cooked, I go ahead and I add the frozen broccoli florets to this. It's just 1 regular size bag. I'm not sure how many ounces that is, maybe 10 ounces. You put as much broccoli in as you'd like, and however much the pan will hold. If your family really likes broccoli, this is a good way to stretch out this dish. Adding the carrots in, then a 1/2 cup of packed brown sugar. If you don't care for the sweetness of the brown sugar, don't put as much in. Then I added a half a cup of soy sauce. The recipe calls for 2 teaspoons of sesame oil. I didn't have that, and so I left it out. If you wanted to put a couple of teaspoons of vegetable oil in there, you could, but I don't think it needs it. I added 4 tablespoons of hoisin sauce and didn't measure that, but it was close enough. Then for seasonings, I added ground ginger. It's supposed to be 1/4 of a teaspoon, but you'll see the jar kind of slipped, and that was probably more than 1/4 of a teaspoon. The recipe called for 3 cloves of garlic, finely minced, and I just used powdered garlic and just sprinkled it on according to our tastes. I had some scallions that I washed, and I am just cutting those with my kitchen scissors into like 2-inch lengths. There goes the garlic. The recipe also calls for crushed red pepper and black pepper. I added the black pepper but didn't add the crushed red pepper. And for us, the spice of the ground ginger and the black pepper was enough. So if you like things spicier, add a little crushed red pepper. But if not, it was the perfect spiciness. I'm just adding the beef back in here. I didn't want it to get dried out, but our dish is done, so I am just mixing the beef back in. And this was about 2 pounds of beef, or 2 steaks, 2 sirloin steaks. This made a really good meal. We didn't have anything to go with it. It ended up making 4 really large servings. We had it for 2 consecutive nights, just the 2 of us, and it made a lot of food. If you wanted to, you could add frozen egg rolls with this, and that would make a really nice Asian-inspired meal. Some people might think that it was too sweet, that there was too much brown sugar in it. If you don't like it as sweet, then don't add as much brown sugar, or add a little more hoisin. I think that kind of tempers the sugar a little bit. But anyway, here you have 1 pot beef lo mein, and it was really yummy. Next, we have 1 pan Big Mac casserole. And so to start off, I am going to cook 8 pieces of bacon in my fry pan. This is the same pan that I'm going to cook the rest of the meal in as well. While that's cooking, I am going to dice 1 onion fairly fine, and half of that will go in with the ground beef mixture while it's cooking, and then the other half I'll keep raw, and we can use that as a topping for our Big Mac casserole. It's kind of like a burrito bowl, but just in a hamburger fashion. The recipe calls for raw potatoes, but I thought these hash browns would make it a little easier. And they ended up being kind of mushy for my taste. So I think next time I will add the ground beef in first and get that cooking, and then add the potatoes and the onions in after my ground beef has had time to cook. So I'm just adding in, I added about a half a bag of those potatoes and half of the onion, and then now I added in about 1.5 pounds of ground beef, and I am putting some pepper on that and salt. The original recipe called for cooking the potatoes and the burger meat separately, and for the potatoes, the spices it called for was 2 cloves of minced garlic and a 1/4 cup chicken broth and a 1/2 teaspoon of paprika. For the burger meat, it called for 1 teaspoon of onion powder, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of paprika, 1.5 teaspoons of salt, and a 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. But what I did was I just sprinkled on onion powder, and you can see I ran out of onion powder, but I had another one in the cabinet. So I sprinkled on onion powder and garlic powder. I'm not sure if I got the same amounts that it called for or not. So you can either do it to taste, or you can do it as the recipe calls for it. And I'll leave the recipe in the description box. I'm just getting the toppings to our casserole ready now. So I've got that 1/2 of a chopped onion, and I'm just putting that into a container. I'm chopping up some dill pickles. You can use pickle chips, but I didn't have any, and I had these kosher dills, whole pickles, so I am just going to slice up. I didn't do thin slices, they're more chunky slices, but so I'm chopping up some of those as a topping. And I'm also cutting some grape tomatoes in quarters to use as a topping also. And then shredding a few lettuce leaves. And then I also have some grated cheddar cheese that I'm going to put out as well. The recipe calls for layering all of the toppings in the pan once the meat and the potatoes and the onions are cooked. But I didn't know if we were going to have leftovers. We didn't. And I didn't want those things to be wilted if we had leftovers. So I just kept them separate on the counter, and everybody just built their own hamburger Big Mac in a bowl. So now I am just making some secret sauce, which is not much of a secret. I'm just making a Thousand Island, just a very simple Thousand Island with mayonnaise and ketchup and some sweet pickle relish. There's a recipe that goes with the casserole recipe for secret sauce, and I'll put that in the description box for you. But at this point, I just want to get dinner on the table. And so I'm making this. It was great. There was only a couple of tablespoons left of this and nothing left of everything else. So it was a win. So I'm just chopping the bacon up now. And at this point, I realized that the bacon thief had struck because there were only 7 pieces of bacon. And I should have known that was going to happen and made 9, but it was fine. Everybody had what they wanted of it. So that's going into a bowl, and we are ready to plate up and get ready for dinner. The meat mixture is done, and so I just put some of that in my bowl. I'm adding some cheese. I'm adding some onions, tomatoes, pickles, and lettuce. I added it all, the bacon, and then I topped it with the secret sauce dressing. And this was really good. This wasn't my favorite, and like I said, the potatoes were a little mushy, but my family loved it, or at least they said they did. One family member rated it an 8.5 out of 10, and so I think that that's really good. I'll probably make this again, but I think that children would probably really like this a lot. And in real time, looking back at the video, it took me 40 minutes to make this, but I was also filming and talking to people and managing other things at the same time. So I think that this easy could be a 30-minute meal, especially if you used packaged bacon bits or pre-cooked bacon or prepared Thousand Island dressing. It could come together really quickly. Next up, we have one pot tater tot casserole. And I'm using my Dutch oven for this because it's going to finish its cooking time in the oven. And my skillet is not oven safe. So I am adding about a pound of ground beef to the Dutch oven and getting that browned up. I had some leftover onion from the Big Mac casserole, and so I am adding that. It's all chopped up, and so that makes it convenient and fast. If you want to do your chopping of vegetables the night before, that always helps with dinner time. I am opening a can of green beans and draining the juice from that. You could use mixed vegetables in this if you'd like. If you like all of the vegetables that are in mixed vegetables, either frozen or a can of veg-all, that would be good. We prefer green beans, so that's just what I put in there. I didn't show it on camera, but I used a paper towel to blot some of the grease from the ground beef. There wasn't a lot, but I used that paper towel. And then I'm adding about a half a cup of water to the ground beef here. I added salt and pepper to taste, and now I am adding garlic powder and onion powder to taste. Just a few sprinkles of both. I added a couple of shakes of Worcestershire sauce. And then I added a can of cream of mushroom soup and mixed it up really well. I then decided that I wanted another can of cream of mushroom soup in it, so I added that and the green beans and mixed it all together really well. Once it was all mixed together, I put a half of a bag of tater tots on top of it. And I didn't layer them nicely, I just threw them on there. And then my oven was preheated to 450 degrees Fahrenheit, and I put it in for 20 minutes to bake. And this is what it looked like as it came out of the oven, all hot and bubbly and brown. We just had this on its own, but you could serve it with a salad. You could use one of the bag salads that you can buy in the grocery store now that are really good, that come with the crunchy toppings and the dressing already in the bag. Or you can make your own salad. You could have rolls with it. I guess you don't really need another starch with the tater tots, but you could add another vegetable or a salad or some fruit to this and have a really nice meal. And my husband added cheese to his. Now for our last recipe in this video, 1-pan beef burrito bowls. So if you forget to take the meat out of the freezer in the morning or the night before, you don't have to worry if it's ground beef. Just put it in the pan on a medium heat, and within 20 minutes, 15, it will be defrosted and cooked. So I'm just letting it cook on one side, flipping it over and scraping the soft meat into the pan. Here I am prepping some grape tomatoes, cutting them in quarters, and this will be one of our toppings for our burrito bowls. The meat doesn't get an A+ in visuals, but it's coming along nicely. It doesn't take very long this way to defrost it. If you're working with defrosted ground beef, this is probably a 30-minute meal. So while the meat is finishing cooking, I am going to work on the rest of my toppings. Here I have some leftover bagged salad, and I am going to add just a couple of romaine lettuce leaves chopped up finely to that. So now the lettuce is all ready to go. The meat is all ready to go, and I'm adding just a little bit of my homemade taco seasoning in on top of that. That was probably a tablespoon and a half. You can use store-bought, of course. And I'm stirring that up and going to add a little bit of water. It has cornstarch in it, so it will thicken slightly. But I'm going to be adding more water with the rice mix. And I didn't drain. There was very little grease with the ground beef, and I didn't mop it up with a paper towel or drain it because the rice mix that I'm using calls for some fat in it. So I just use the hamburger grease as the fat. This is a Mexican rice mix that has pasta in it. So I think when I do this dish again, before I add the taco seasoning to the meat, that I will pour the rice mix in and brown it a little in the pan before I add the taco seasoning and then the seasonings to the rice mix and the water. This rice mix calls for a can of diced tomatoes along with the water and the seasonings and the mix. but I didn't put that into this. You can if you want, but I'm using fresh tomatoes on top, and I wanted to see how it would be without the tomatoes in it. So here I've added the rice mix, I'm adding the seasoning mix, and I've added 2 1/4 cups of water. Now I'm adding a can of black beans that I rinsed and drained earlier, and a can of corn. I'm stirring this together, and then I am going to bring it to a boil and reduce the heat to low on my stovetop. I also need to cover this while it's cooking, but I don't have a lid that will fit this pan, and so I am just putting one of my baking sheets over top of it as a makeshift cover. 20 minutes simmering and it's done. And so I'm just mixing it together here. For a side dish to this, I made some cornbread earlier in the day, and I will serve that with butter and honey. Now to make up our burrito bowls, I have the lettuce and the tomatoes that I prepared earlier. I have some grated cheddar cheese. I like to get these little guacamole packs from Costco. They go in the freezer and you pull them out when you want avocado toast or guacamole. I also have some sour cream and homemade pickled onions as toppings. I am putting a little bit of everything on mine. I'm not going to have guacamole tonight though. I'm putting cheese, pickled onions, tomatoes, lettuce, and then this is a homemade dressing that's dairy-free. And then I like to put salad dressing on mine. But you can put salsa if you prefer that. I know this is the Western dressing and it kind of looks like enchilada sauce, but it's not. It makes for a good salad. This turned out really well, and we both really liked it a lot, and I'll be making it this way again. Usually in the past when I've made burrito bowls, I make up the taco meat and then serve the beans and the corn separately, but we'll be doing it again this way. So here we have 5 very different and delicious one-pot dinners that you can make in a relatively small amount of time, and I hope that you try them. Thank you for joining me, and I hope that you comment and subscribe and push that thumbs up button. Thanks again. Bye-bye.